How's it going, everyone? My name is Divine, and today we're going to be taking a look at 4 different choices for your starting cities and going over the details of these cities and their surrounding areas. I'm making this guide to let you know my personal feelings about the starting cities. So if you already know from previous tests and what city you want to start in, then I say go for it. But if you want to know just a little bit more maybe about other areas first, then this video is for you. It's really meant to just help others who don't possibly know about all the different city features that are out there and just to make the most informed choice when the game comes out. Now there is 4 different starting zones which include First Light, Monarch's Bluff, Everfall, and Windsward, and each really do have their own pros and cons for them. So starting up first, we're going to go with First Light, which is the southernmost city on the map. Now let's talk about a few features that this city does have to offer. One of the first features you're going to notice is Sherry the Cow, where you can actually get milk. Then there is also 2 wells where you can obtain water and a honey jar that all can be collected once an hour. So that's just good to know. So if you're in between quests and it's been about an hour, make sure you guys collect all these different supplies that you can get from this town. Continuing right on, we have the faction supply cart, which will actually give you food, but can only be collected once a day, and you also need to make sure that your faction owns the territory so that you can gather this in the town. Now I'm going to go ahead and throw up the map here and we can see the layout of the city. Now one thing to note is that all the crafting stations are kind of spaced out apart. I don't think it's nearly as bad as Monarch's Bluff, but it's not as good as places like Everfall and Windsward, unfortunately. So another great feature about this town is going to be that you have 4 options for housing here. So I'm going to throw up a housing buying guide here and you can see all the different tiers. So that tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now these are going to be the full prices, so if you buy your house for the first time, these prices will be cut in half. So just be aware of that, but I'll leave that up there for just a second so you guys can see where all these tier 1 houses are, and those would be 2,500 gold. Now moving on, we can see that we're also going to be right near the coast, which means for fishing, we have a great advantage of doing saltwater fishing. So if you guys are really into the fishing scene, you can go pretty much not too far out from the major city and just start fishing along the beach. Now this city might seem kind of great initially, but there are some cons present, and the first one from this map that we can see is that it's going to be the furthest away from its starting beach area. Now that's going to be that watchtower quest, especially if you're trying to do it quickly. Making that run all the way to the town is kind of crazy. Now it is also going to be the furthest away for the main quest line as well, and it ends up taking, I think, about 20 minutes longer than any of the other cities for a starting area to do the main quest itself. And in my opinion, this is barely any time in the game, but I wanted to note this here for those people that do like to rush the quest as fast as possible. Now, the last con I want to mention right now is that this town will likely be the worst starting area for trading posts. So that's that auction house. Since it's probably going to be the least populated one, selling things on here can actually be to your advantage, but if you're into buying a lot of stuff from the auction house, it is probably going to be the most overpriced city to do that in. Alright, so up next is going to be Monarch's Bluff, which is going to feature similar town benefits to First Light in the way of Bessie the Cow that you can gather milk from. You're also, again, going to get 2 wells for water and a jar of honey. Now, the faction supply cart is actually going to be an iron supply cart. So again, just remember, guys, your faction needs to own the territory for you guys to collect this, and you can collect it once a day. Alright, so again, just like First Light, I'm going to throw up the housing buying guide here, and we can see that we actually have 2 options for a cheaper house that will give us that 2,500 gold purchase, and that's actually going to be in the northwest corner and the southeast corner. So that northwest corner, though, should be noted, it is right next to the town board, so that is actually a pretty decent spot for a house. Now it's worth mentioning that this city probably has the best starting area for harvesting. Now that is getting to level 30. There is a crazy amount of herbs and hemp around here that you can level off of. And then post 30, you have a crazy amount of different magical plants that you can choose from to really help your crafting levels further on. So that's things like creating the ice gauntlet, life staff, fire staff, things like that. Also, you need these moats to actually cut gems as well. So that's another thing that you can kind of future proof yourself in this area. So I just thought this was worth mentioning, especially about Monarch's Bluff, because I do think it's a great harvesting starting area. So Monarch's Bluff does actually share a similarity with First Light in the way that you can actually do some saltwater fishing because it is right next to a beach. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up the fish list that you can find off the coast here. And you can kind of see all the different fish that you can be trying to catch while you're right next to the city. So it is not that far away. And then also note that you can find a lot of flint along these beaches, so it can be really beneficial. They're not hidden under grass or anything like that, so it's a little bit easier to find and collect flint. Now, the last of the similarities to First Light, and unfortunately it's going to be a con for Monarch's Bluff, is going to be its inability to have a good trading post market. Now, this is another town that's probably going to not be as populated as Windsward or Everfall, so your items are probably not going to sell just as quickly, but honestly, like in First Light, you're probably going to be able to sell these items for a lot more. So during the last beta, I was actually selling iron tools in Monarch's Bluff for over 300 gold per, and places like Everfall, since there's so much iron right next to it, they were selling for like less than 100 gold each. So just kind of use the areas to your advantage, and like I said in my previous videos, if you can't sell something in one town, go to another to sell it. So honestly, just play the market to your advantage. Now moving on to my second con and probably my largest one, and that is going to be the layout of the city. Everything is super far apart, and it's probably the most far apart out of any of the 4 starting cities, and it can be kind of aggravating. Now, I wouldn't say that this is the sole reason that you shouldn't do it, but it is a reason to just kind of state, that way you guys are informed about it. And that's kind of it for my cons on this city, so up next is going to be Everfall. Now, Everfall was the first starting city that I ever got to play on in this game, and I think there is always something very special about your first starting city in like a big MMO like this, and it's always going to stick with you when you play the game. It's just one of those towns that's always going to feel right and comfortable to play in, compared to some of the other starting areas. So to go over a few of the amenities in the city, you're only going to actually have a well, a honey jar, and then a faction supply hide cart. So you don't get a cow in this town, and that is something to be very well aware of, and you're only getting 1 well instead of 2 like all the other towns. But one of the greatest features about this town is its location on the map. It is so centrally located. It makes it perfect for when you're ready to move on to those higher level territories that you don't really have to run too far to go to. And another thing to note about this territory is going to be that the fact that you can actually level a little bit higher than the other 3. So the other 3, they typically tell you after level 25 you should move on to a different territory, whereas Everfall, I think you could probably level up to about 27 to 30 pretty comfortably. Now, I would probably recommend you go off to a different territory, because you're probably going to be pretty bored being stuck in just one territory for a bunch of levels like that, but you do have the opportunity where you don't really need to move on just yet. So let's talk about the trading post in this city, and this is probably going to be the go-to on the map for areas. Since it is so centrally located, it makes it the prime area to kind of be the main hub where everybody's going to congregate and kind of try to sell a lot of their stuff on the trading post here. But like I said, for the previous Monarch's Bluff, you might not get the best prices here, so just kind of be aware of that, since it is going to be probably the most active. You are going to have probably more people to compete with on this. Now moving on, whereas Monarch's Bluff was probably the best harvesting starting area, I for one believe Everfall is probably the best area to start iron ore mining. Now, a lot of people are going to probably get this confused with Monarch's Bluff, because Monarch's Bluff does have a lot of great mining areas in it, but I feel like even from my previous video of showing you guys the perfect iron ore run out of Everfall, you can see how it skirts the line basically with Monarch's Bluff. Bluff, and I feel like it's a lot closer to Everfall than it is to the Monarch's Bluff main city. So that is why I feel like Everfall is the place to go to mine ore rather than Monarch's Bluff. So starting off with our cons list in this area, and the first thing I already mentioned is there is no cow in this city, which is a real bummer. Next is going to be that there is no house for 2,500 gold. Now the cheapest house that you can get with the discount is going to be 5,000 gold, so it can make it a little bit tougher getting that first initial starting house. So those are the two major cons that I have with this city. So let's go up, and up next is going to be Windsward. So let's check out that town. So with Windsward, this is easily the most popular city, and everybody wants to use it as their starting location. So let's kind of get a little bit better understanding of why that might be. So as for amenities, Windsward is going to have Dottie the cow, which you can gather milk. You're going to get the 2 wells. You're also going to get a honey jar and then a faction fiber supply cart. And then moving right along, we do get a 2,500 gold house, which is right near the town board, which is awesome, so that you can just basically teleport to your house and turn in those quests even that much faster. And one other thing I do want to talk about is the layout of this city. So this city and Everfall both have great layouts. The distance between all the crafting stations and the town turn-in boards and things like that, I feel like are the perfect distance, unlike in First Light and Monarch's Bluff. Now, just adding to the pros list, Windsward and its territory, it probably has the best location for completing the main storyline quest and getting that tier 1 staff so that you can do things like the Amrin excavation dungeon, and also if you wanted to do some like low-level corrupted portals as well, to get some of those supply crates from there, that is a perfect opportunity as well. Now, continuing on with the quest thing, and also another pro is going to be there is a lake just outside the gates of the city. Now, that lake actually has a early on hotspot fishing spot and a quest giver that will give you a free pole very early on. All you have to do is actually go and talk to him, so no worries about going to find hemp so that you can build yourself a pole. And another thing with fishing is if you don't want to go out to the lake, there's actually a stream that runs through the middle of the town, and you can fish through that. So you can fish basically without ever having to leave into the wilderness, which I guess can be a bonus if you want it to be, but you are missing out on those hot spots and things like that. Now for my last pro on this town is going to be that you can go right outside and find an abundant amount of fronded petal caps and also hemp. Now hemp's going to be perfect if you want to just get your harvesting level up. Also perfect if you want to start crafting that and making light armor. So that's going to be perfect for that kind of stuff. And it's also good to note that these both do not require any level to harvest. So you can actually just start harvesting right after you get a sickle. Now, after all these lists of pros, you can start to really begin to understand why a lot of people are going to try to be picking up Windsward as their main city over any other city, but this city does come with a couple of cons that I have in mind. Now, the first one is going to be the trading post. Again, this is probably going to be a very active trading post, and I don't think it's going to be as active as Everfall, but you still are going to have a very big scene. I think there might even be more people initially here, and then it'll probably transition to Everfall eventually. So you're going to have things where if you're trying to buy things in the auction house, you might be able to find them fairly cheap pretty early on. But if you're someone who's trying to make money, this is going to be very difficult because you're going to have a great deal of people that you're going to have to compete with, unfortunately. And my second con with this city is going to be the lack of iron ore that's kind of near the major city. There's spots here and there, and there's also a pretty good chunk just south of the city, but with the abundant amount of players that are going to be here, I feel like getting iron ore anytime soon after the game releases is going to be very difficult in that area. So that's the only big thing that I would really consider if you're kind of on the fence with Windsward, or if you're just so dedicated. Just note that finding that iron ore may be a lot more difficult, and you may have to worry about trying to get that iron ore at certain times of the day rather than others when everybody else is playing. So it might be like a nighttime thing when you're having to do those farm runs. Now, that's a big portion of all my pros and cons about these towns, but there's a last little comparison that I kind of want to talk about, and that's going to be the nearby crate locations to these major cities. Now, I didn't want to go too far outside the city, and I also wanted to make sure that the enemies were under level 15 because with these supply crates, caches, and stockpiles, you can get them once an hour, and they're going to have items that you're going to need to craft base level items into higher tier level items. So they're going to basically be required. So it's another thing to consider, especially in your starting area and how close you're going to be to some of these crates. All right, so here we are on the New World map, and what we're taking a look at is all these different chests that are right near First Light. Now, there is going to be 23 supply crates that are nearby and one provisioning stockpile. So we can see a lot of the chests are up here, but again, note the monster level, which is 9 to 10 up here. We have a group down here, which is going to be between 6 and 8. And then we also have 2 down here, which is going to be around the level 6 beasts. Now, I didn't count this bridge just because this is over my level 15 limit that I set in place. All right, so up next is going to be Monarch's Bluff, where we're going to have 3 provision crates, 1 provision stockpile, 10 supply crates, 1 alchemy stockpile, and that's going to be it in the immediate vicinity. And you'll notice that the enemy level here is only going to be level 6, which is awesome. So that means there's going to be a lot of really low level enemies, and it's also super close to the town. You literally pretty much run outside over here, and you're pretty much right in that town to collect all these. And like I said before, it's a 1-hour cooldown, so that gives you the perfect opportunity. Now, it should be noted that up here into the mountain is level 7 with a whole heaping load of chests up here, but I did not count those in this just because getting up that mountain can kind of be a pain. You can either kind of walk up it over here, otherwise you have to follow the path all the way around, and it can be a bit of a time sink, I think, and that's the whole reason we don't count those chests in this initial count. All right, so up next is going to be Everfall with the least amount of chests possible, and that's only going to come in at 8 supply chests and 1 provisioning crate. But one thing to note here is once you hit level 15, that does open up some, but it being right on the edge of where I said that the cutoff limit was, I did not feel comfortable enough to count them. But it's just good to note that that is there, especially if you do like the Everfall town. You have that option once you can kind of battle those kind of level enemies. All right, and lastly, we have Windsward coming in super strong. What a surprise. With 32 supply crates, 5 provisioning crates, and they're all kind of in a like half circle around the city, as we can kind of see. And they all kind of step up in levels. So you have level 6 to 7, 8 to 10, and 9 to 10. And then there's also some down in here. You have like level 6 chests right here. But honestly, it probably gives you the most amount of chests to go and collect. So you could just basically, once you're like higher level, just run through these towns collecting all these supply crates and stuff like that, and then hitting the town. So it's just good to know, but this one definitely has the most, and especially if you start to zoom out, you can see all the different crates down here as well, hitting that level 15 buffer that I had talked about, and then going even higher after that. So that's it about these supply crates. Now there is a couple takeaways that I wanted to discuss before ending off this video. And the first is that please note that all this research for items nearby, I'm going by immediate vicinity to major cities. I'm not looking at the entire territory as a whole, unfortunately. I was looking at, fast ways to gather materials, how close in proximity is it to the city itself, because I know a lot of you guys don't want to be running around all across the territory, because a lot of people do complain that you do have to do a lot of running in this game, and you will. And honestly, I find it great fun to just go explore and gather all this stuff as I'm exploring, but some of you might not be that way, and I completely understand. So the last thing I want to do for this video is just kind of give you my insight of how I would rank all 4 of these starting areas and my rationale behind that. So up first, I'm going to talk about First Light, which honestly, in my opinion, is probably the worst starting location for a couple reasons. And the first is going to be the distance to get anywhere. And honestly, this is the only town to me that feels like a running simulator, just because I think it starts out like right away you're just constantly running and trying to get to these areas that seem so far away, and I really wish they would have fixed this. And that's probably going to be my biggest gripe with this territory and starting area. But my next would be the lack of materials that are nearby. Now there are a decent amount of supply crates, but honestly things like iron or higher level harvesting, it just seems to lack a little bit, and it's not worth it to me. Now, Everfall is up next in third place. Now, I will always have a fondness for this city since it was my first city to go to, but there is a lack of a cow which can provide easy milk, and especially making items for that town board and stuff. I feel like milk is just kind of a necessity. But there also is no cheap house purchases. So if you don't make that like ton of gold early on, this can be really kind of a bummer. And that's kind of the reason why I put it third. And I'll discuss a little bit more into that here in just a minute too. Now, in second place for me is going to be Windsward, and you might be saying to yourself, why? That is basically the perfect city to go to. It has everything and anything you would ever want in it. And honestly, to me, it's just going to be the sheer amount of people that are going to be here that are going to kind of ruin it for me. And the lack of iron ore initially, because I'm going to be kind of going straight for iron tools and then for steel tools. And I feel like that Everfall Monarch's Bluff area is going to be the ideal for me. And you're also not going to have as many magic plants as you are in Monarch's Bluff. So that leaves me to my first pick, which is Monarch's Bluff. And that is because there is a lot of money-making materials nearby that can be farmed and gained very quickly. So I can gain a lot of levels in a short amount of time, and I can also create a lot of stuff very, very quickly. And then my thinking behind this all is that it is so close to Everfall that it's a pretty easy walk over there. So if I need to sell items, that I can't sell in the Monarch's Bluff, or I need to purchase something that's a little bit cheaper, I can just go over to Everfall. And since they're going to pretty much have a booming auction house economy over there, it's going to be easy to go buy stuff or sell stuff if there's items that I just want to get rid of, especially higher tier items, that are going to be a little bit harder to sell in those lower level territories. So I am curious to know where you guys would like to end up for your starting locations and why. And also if you're going to try to keep creating new characters till you get to those areas, or are you just going to say screw it and walk over to the area instead? So please put that down in a comment below and I would love to read those. Now that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys learned some pros and cons about all these starting locations and really make better informed decisions about which starting city is right for you. Now, if you like this video and want to be notified when a new video goes live, think about hitting that subscribe button and notification bell, and hopefully I will see you guys in the next video.